Welcome to a new episode of New Worker Radio, presented by the Communist Workers Platform. New Worker Radio brings you national and international updates from a worker's perspective. More news, local stories, and updates like this are published regularly in our national newspaper and online at newworker.us. You can support New Worker and the CWP on Patreon, patreon.com/newworker. In this episode, we discuss the escalating imperialist conflict over control of critical trade that is taking center stage in the Strait of Hormuz. And in this context, we discuss that when monopolies go to war over profits, it is the working class that pays the heavy price. In national news, we examine the collapse of Spirit Airlines, as this presents, yet again, the subordination of hardworking people to the demands of profit. In local stories, a community in rural Utah is fighting back against a proposal to build one of the largest data centers in the U.S. to date. This is over fears of energy consumption and environmental impacts. And lastly, we celebrate International Workers' Day, May Day, and we reflect on the meaning of this day, its past, its present, and a future as a symbol of workers' struggle against the capitalist class. In international news, the recent back and forth of strikes between the U.S. and Iran in the Straits of Hormuz confirms the imperialist war over the control of this critical passage is escalating. It has become clear that Iran is at the center of international tensions between the warring capital interests of China and the U.S. Iran is very important in the new Silk Road and therefore crucial for the interests of Chinese capital, as well as being an important supplier of Chinese oil. For the U.S., which sees China as its biggest competitor and a threat to its own dominance on the international playing field, Iran is therefore a thorn in the side of capitalist interests at home. Amid the U.S. operation to block Iranian ports, and Tehran aiming to impose a, quote, new reality in the Straits of Hormuz, U.S. forces attacked an Iranian oil tanker in an attempt to break the blockade, with Iran responding with attacks on U.S. destroyers. U.S. forces also bombed Iranian facilities at the port of Bandar Abbas and on the island of Keshem. The U.S. claims to have repelled Iranian attacks on its ships, while Iran's Navy has said that U.S. forces suffered serious blows and forced 3 U.S. warships to quickly leave the strait. President Trump downplayed the damage to U.S. forces and continued to make threats on his social media platform that if Iran doesn't quickly sign a nuclear deal, the U.S. will hit them, quote, much harder and much more violently. He also said a truce is in place for now, but warned, quote, if there isn't a truce, you'll see a big flash coming out of Iran. While U.S. and Iranian forces take shots at one another, indirect U.S. and Iran negotiations are underway in Pakistan for a possible compromise, even as this situation is constantly building towards further escalation. While these talks go on, it is clear that there is little agreement between the two nations on basic terms such as the control over the Strait of Hormuz. In southern Lebanon, U.S.-Israeli imperialist designs are also continuing, as Israeli airstrikes continue daily despite new negotiations and the existing truce that is now 3 weeks old. Most recently, the Israeli army issued orders to evacuate 4 villages in southern Lebanon, calling on thousands of people to leave their homes and then proceeding to bomb the villages. The Lebanese Ministry of Health estimates that since March 2nd, Israeli attacks have killed at least 2,700 people, this is including children, and at least another 8,300 have been injured. At the diplomatic level, new Israeli-Lebanon talks are planned for May 14th and 15th in Washington. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has been calling for an end to Israeli strikes and for a permanent, quote, security agreement, while Hezbollah has accused the Lebanese government leadership of offering nothing but surrender. While politicians, generals, and arms companies talk about our, quote, national interest, the reality of war paints a much different picture. Payment is made with life, health, and the incomes of working people. A recent report of the U.S. Army's supply difficulties in the Middle East makes this depressingly visible. U.S. soldiers and Marines on warships deployed against Iran tell their families about poor supplies and declining morale. Photos show a limited supply of food and meager rations. Relatives of service members have attempted to send packages of hygiene products, snacks, medication, and socks out of their own pockets, but even mail delivery to many military addresses was suspended. Families who spent hundreds or even thousands of dollars to send assistance see their packages are left laying around spoiling, and without knowing whether their shipments will ever arrive. This is the true nature of war. If imperialist powers want to assert their interests militarily, then the workers pay for it. The sons and the daughters of the working class stand on the ships, and in the barracks, and on the front lines. Their families raise money for supply packages, while states spend billions on missiles, aircraft carriers, and warplanes. This is the deep contradiction inherent to the U.S. war economy, that there seems to be unlimited money available for rearmament, interventions, and blockades, but not for adequate supplies for soldiers, or for functioning infrastructure in our cities, or for social security. This contradiction is not unique to the United States, and the same is true under every imperialist conflict and impacts the working class on either side. Whether American sailors at sea, Iranian workers fleeing the consequences of sanctions and bombings, or refugee workers living under repression abroad, we all bear the burden while elites play their power games. The working class has no interest and nothing to gain from imperialist wars, blockades, or geopolitical zones of influence. We gain nothing from destroyed ports, soaring inflation on basic items, severely reduced social services, or the deaths of our children in uniform. What is sold as our, quote, national security actually means securing profits, controlling raw materials, and strategic dominance. While corporations make money from supplying weapons of war, working-class families organize improvised aid for those in uniform. This shows who actually cares for each other in this society and who collects the money. It has always been true that the worker in Baltimore objectively has more in common with the dock worker in Bandar Abbas, a nurse in Tehran, or a mechanic in Haifa than they will ever have with the shareholders of the defense industry or the strategists in the State Department. The lesson is clear. Imperialist wars are not our wars. Their bills are always passed on to working people through taxes, inflation, cuts, starvation, and trauma, while banks and corporations reap all the profit. In national news, on May 2nd, Spirit Airlines announced it will wind down operations, resulting in the immediate cancellation of all flights and the liquidation of its remaining assets. With this shutdown, nearly 17,000 employees and contractors have been laid off. After two separate filings for bankruptcy, one in 2024 and 2025, and a failed attempt for a government bailout, the soaring gas prices due to the war in Iran has left the airliner with, quote, no possible way forward. Since 1999, Spirit has conducted business on a low-cost carrier model that provided low-fare travel by limiting luxury amenities offered by most mainstream airliners. This model made them a go-to option for working-class passengers. Now, hundreds of thousands of seats have disappeared from the market in the first half of May alone, and economists expect the price of travel to soar even higher. While leaving passengers scrambling to get their money back or find accommodation for canceled flights, the workers of Spirit Airlines were deliberately left unaware of their impending job losses. The president of the Association of Flight Attendants reported that many workers don't know when they can expect their last paychecks, and many of them will be forced to take out their retirement savings and use it as emergency funds now that they're out of work and already living paycheck to paycheck. Spirit now claims in court documents that they did not conduct layoffs earlier or inform their employees of this situation because that would have, quote, hindered its efforts to secure additional funding. This is how capitalism treats workers, even in a strategic sector such as transport. As long as the company was able to squeeze revenue, the staff was necessary. As this crisis deepened, though, and fuel costs rose and capital no longer saw a path forward to make profits, the same workforce suddenly became a burden to them. The purpose of capital is not to maintain socially important traffic or protect the employees' livelihoods, but to secure returns. When the possibility of profits disappears, companies close, executives get their bonuses, while chaos ensues for workers and travelers. The collapse of Spirit shows that even aviation, which is sold to us as modern infrastructure under capitalism, is fundamentally subordinate to the interests of finance and the owners. The war against Iran has resulted in tens of billions of profits for the oil industry and large banks, those who are made whole during times of crisis. Bankruptcy courts will ensure that investors are paid, and Spirit's executives have already requested at least $10.7 million in retention bonuses for themselves. Bourgeois politicians will sleep easily, knowing that shareholders will recover, but workers will be left with nothing, forced to use up their savings, and may go many months or years without work. It is imperative that the only way to rectify this parasitic system is to establish a state where the working class is in control, where these industries are not operated by private interests and capital, but operated based on their utility as a public good. The Communist Workers' Platform of the U.S. stands with the thousands of workers betrayed by their employer, by politicians, and the entirety of the U.S. war machine. In local news, over 1,000 people protested during a meeting in rural Box Elder County in Utah on May 4th, after politicians approved one of the world's largest data center projects for AI called the Stratos Project. The facility is planned to be built on around 40,000 acres of land and is supported by, among others, Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary. The project is expected to consume massive amounts of electricity, more energy than all of Utah consumes today, and around 16 billion gallons of water per year. Critics warn of increased emissions, worsening water shortages, and damages to the Great Salt Lake, which is already shrinking due to drought and climate change. Resistance is growing rapidly. Nearly 4,000 people protested the project's water application, which was later withdrawn. The Box Elder protest meeting finally ended with police intervention against the participants. Tensions rose as the project managers refused to answer their questions, and locals now accuse the project of ignoring the democratic process. It is particularly relevant that the project has been quickly approved through connections of the Military Industrial Development Authority for, quote, national security. Similar conflicts over AI data centers and other high-tech facilities are now growing around the United States, where residents are protesting rising energy costs, water consumption, and environmental impacts. Despite all this, the project managers in Utah continue to push the project forward at record speeds, but they face increasingly strong opposition. While thousands of protests were filed against the project's water application, residents of Box Elder County have already begun organizing a citizens' referendum on the matter. And lastly, we celebrate May Day, a special day for all working men and women when workers across the globe celebrate their fight against the misery and oppression they endure under the collective boot of a handful of rich leeches, the capitalist class. It is a day to celebrate the rising class consciousness and determined struggle of the workers to end all exploitation of man over man. In this way, it serves as a day not only of remembrance, but of militant action. This fact remains true despite the attempts of the class enemy and their social democratic lackeys to debase it as merely a holiday or obscure its revolutionary origins. Moreover, the legacy of May Day is especially significant to the workers of the United States as an integral but purposely suppressed part of our history. The 1880s was a period of rising action for the workers' movement, particularly against the 14-plus hour workday, which at the time was the norm. The working class, understanding the need for militant trade union struggle, began organizing around the demand for an 8-hour workday. But this was only one of demands out of many. The fact was, the whole working class fought against not just their own bosses, but a whole class of exploiters, the bourgeoisie. The workers, understanding this reality, called for coordinated mass strikes across the entire country on May 1st, 1886. The movement began to swell, and hundreds of thousands of workers went on strike. The police, fulfilling their role as the attack dogs of capital, met the striking workers with violence. The capitalists sought to crush the movement. In Chicago, the police drew first blood when they fired into a crowd of striking McCormick workers. The sacrifice of the striking workers inspired May 1 to develop into a day for the whole world's working class, a day to remember that our fight as workers for a new world is a just, historical fight to honor the lives of our predecessors through action and to continue the fight against the exploiters, steadfastly and brave. May 1 is therefore a day to acknowledge the global scope of our struggle, the unity of the working classes of all nations, united by our shared conditions of exploitation against our one common enemy, capitalism. Today, 140 years since the uprising in Chicago, capitalism continues its periodic crises in new forms. Gaza lies in ruins in the wake of the genocidal onslaught of the Israeli-US imperialist war machine. In Ukraine, the war rages on as workers on both sides continue into their fifth year of mutual slaughter on the battlefield, fighting to further the aims of their capitalist overlords. Iran and Venezuela have faced direct attacks by the U.S. military in just the first 3 months of this year, resulting in thousands of deaths and billions of profits for the military industries. And here in the U.S., prices for everyday goods, housing, and more continue to rise while wages stagnate and the job market contracts. More and more workers are turning to excessive overtime, to gig work, to a second or third job, or even tapping into their retirement savings just to make ends meet, while managerial and CEO pay have seen significant increases. For the working class, this means that the productivity gains that the companies reap are not translated into security or to higher living standards, but into even greater rewards for the top. Last week, the CWP attended May Day rallies throughout the country that displayed a sharp disconnect from the holiday's true meaning. Democratic Party officials and union bureaucrats led the events, not the workers. Speeches made by Shawn Fain of the UAW, who just 2 years ago spared automakers a total shutdown by accepting wage increases that, after inflation, were insultingly lower than what workers earned 20 years ago. The production workers, those who have the ability to truly shut it down, were for the large part absent from these events. This absence reflects workers' growing isolation from one another, the growing fears of retaliation and income loss, and the complete lack of a driving purpose to show up in force at such events. Overcoming this requires a mass, militant working organization. The fight to end this system is more urgent than ever. Reflecting upon the past and what our future can be, the CWP USA sets the following demands for a red May Day. 1. Strengthening the internationalism of the working class movement, especially with the peoples of Cuba, Palestine, and all those under the malicious boot of imperialism. 2. The closing and removal of all U.S. military bases abroad. 3. The cessation of all imperialist agreements. 4. The unity of the working class across industries. And lastly, to elevate the workers' struggle around our social rights to education, healthcare, stable and permanent work, shorter working days, and safe working conditions. We recognize that to win and protect any of these social rights requires workers' power through socialism communism. A red May Day must serve as a reminder that this is our ultimate struggle. The very history of May Day has shown us the way forward to a workers' revolution. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so that you can get notifications when our next episode is published. If you're outraged over high costs of living, soaring rents, and the stress of navigating day-to-day life, consider the CWP USA to fight for a real change. To learn more and sign up, go to cwpusa.org.